to A Well-Designed Business. My name is LuAnn, and I'm so glad you found this podcast. Together with my husband Vince and our partner Bill, we have grown our company WindowWorks from the ground up. So I know and I understand the challenges you face in running your interior design business. I also know that your talent alone isn't enough to ensure your success. So on this podcast, we talk about strategies and practical steps to help you grow your business. But make no mistake about it, we have our share of fun here too, mixed in with those aha moments that I love so much. This isn't fluff. Nobody has time for that. Whether you are a new interior designer or a seasoned designer, I am here to help you create and to manage the kind of interior design firm that you dream of. It's straight talk and it's action. Are you ready? Let's get started. Hi, welcome to another episode of A Well-Designed Business. It's Power Talk Friday. Today on the show, I have Bonnie Fahy. Bonnie is the creator of Source It, which Forbes said is the world's premier education in online hiring and outsourcing for entrepreneurs. That's a pretty bold statement. Okay. Now, Bonnie says that she stumbled upon outsourcing during the early days of her internet marketing career, and she was astonished to see her profits quadruple in only 3 months. Inspired by the results she was getting, she started consulting with other entrepreneurs, helping them grow their businesses from 5 and 6 figures to 6 and 7 figures using the same techniques and strategies. Now, I have to say, before interviewing Bonnie officially for the podcast, I did do a lot of off-air conversation with her, making sure that I felt that there was a fit here for us in our industry, because there are a lot of industries where outsourcing and using a VA is a no-brainer. But I wasn't 100% sure. And look, I even say in the interview, I mentioned Brittany Elms, my design assistant. You know, when we have these VAs that are specific to our industry, we also have Taylor and Raquel over at Do Not Let Us Design, right? When we have these companies that are set up specific for our industry, I'm not worried about it. I think, you know what, slam dunk. We know that these are designers first that have decided to work their model in this way. But I wasn't sure that this was transferable to our industry. And I was pretty satisfied by my conversation with Bonnie before recording that it is viable for us. There are lots of pieces to running a business, and not all of them need to be done by you as the principal. So Bonnie has a unique approach that she calls hybrid sourcing, a combination of leveraging the VAs domestically and internationally. And she's really going to share with us some powerful strategies so that you can start to at least ask the questions, is this a possible alternative for you in your growing interior design firm? And then, of course, we get into some of the specific tips and strategies you need to know in order to actually take the step to do that. So I think you're going to enjoy this interview. And before we get to the interview, I just want to remind you to be ever on the lookout for ways to thank our sponsors. Of course, we have Cravat Inc. If you're going to High Point Market or any of the markets, Las Vegas Market, whenever you're in town, it'd be awesome if you reached out to Cravat and let them know that you love and appreciate them for their sponsorship of the show. You also have My Doma Studio, your platform for organizing, managing, and implementing your projects. Same thing when you run into them at the various markets. It's nice if you acknowledge and say thank you. And also don't forget, you have offers coming to you from each of these sponsors through the specific URL. So at mydomastudio.com/a-well-designed-business. And at Cravat, you can get 10% off any one purchase of Cravat fabric, wallpaper, or trim by using the code AWDB10 at checkout. Okay? So now let's get to my conversation with Bonnie. Hi, Bonnie. Thanks so much for joining me on A Well-Designed Business today.
Hi, it's so good to be here.
So, Bonnie, this is good luck for me and my peeps here listening to the podcast, because in the last couple of weeks, oddly, more so than many, many months previous, I keep getting requests from designers, either through my coaching with them or through Instagram and Facebook, for advice on hiring, on where to look to hire and how to hire. And of course, many of them are concerned, rightfully so, about taking on a full-time employee. And the other problem is not only is the fear of being able to support the full salary and the benefits package, but a lot of designers work out of their home. And so it's really not even comfortable to hire somebody and have them work side by side with you. And the thing is, when I learned about you and understood that you specialize in helping people understand the best process for hiring VAs, I thought, oh, okay, we're on to something here. So the thing is, I know from my crossover into podcasting and to the industry of podcasting that not only is VAs a very, very common thing for that industry in particular to have working for them, but also VAs from other countries. And it's not so common for a lot of other industries. So I'm sure there are designers listening that are familiar with the concept and the process, but I think for most of it, it's sort of a new idea. Would you tell us a little bit about why and how you're so passionate and knowledgeable and why you think that VA is a viable resource for a small business owner?
Yeah, for sure. So one thing that occurred for me early on is that I needed to hire someone, like many of your audience members. Unfortunately, I started in a position in my business where I was only making $16,000 a year in my first year of business. And so while I was getting all this advice about how I should hire a team, I had no financial resources to do so. And so by some way of luck, I discovered this outsourcing thing. And just like everyone else who's listening, I thought to myself, well, that'll never work because you get what you pay for, right? Right? That's like what everyone thinks. You get what you pay for. That's what we're told. You get what you pay for. And while that might be true when all things are equal, you have to remember on a global basis, all things are not equal. And, the lifestyle you can afford in Bali is dramatically different than the lifestyle you can afford in New York City. And the rate at which people are paid goes in line with that. And so what a lot of us forget is that you can get a PhD level person in Indonesia or the Philippines, and you will literally pay a fraction of the price because they have a lot lower cost of living. And so once I really got that idea that you could get a much higher level person and pay a fraction of the price, then I got excited and I started tinkering and playing a little bit.
And let me just, I'm so famous for just saying the thing that's, kind of hard to say, I guess is the only way to say it, just the elephant in the room. We're not talking about underpaying and taking advantage of a workforce.
We're
talking, right? I mean, so I just want to make the relationship. So in other words, if let's just use, a entry-level position in either country, in any country, it doesn't matter. So in the U.S., an entry-level position, I think they're now just currently talking about making the minimum wage $15 an hour, okay? So if you're paying a VA, and let's use the Philippines as an example, $5 an hour to do tasks for you, we're not talking about taking advantage. We're talking about that's the going rate in that company, in that country, and that person is feeling valued and respected because that's the going rate.
Yeah. And can I add something to that?
Yes, please.
So I actually am like full-hearted in that you should never underpay people.
Right.
And
right.
To your point, LuAnn, people in the Philippines, their minimum wage is $2 an hour. And you have to remember that like people are going to college there. They're driving in 45 minutes of traffic. Moms are being separated from their newborn babies to go to work in these situations to get paid $2 an hour, right? They may not even be able to afford a car at that level, but they'll be taking the bus 45 minutes. So like actually giving someone, and many virtual assistants are new moms or, stay-at-home moms, the ability to work at a multiple of the minimum wage is actually like the equivalent of paying someone, $20, $30, $40, $50 an hour here, because when you're paying them a multiple of the local economy, the lifestyle they can afford is so much bigger and better than what we could imagine. Like a lot of the virtual assistants I work with, They have drones, they've got iPhones, they're going to the beach, their kids are in private school, they got the maid, they're getting the $10 an hour massages over in the Philippines. And I'm like, oh my God, I wish we had $10 an hour massages here. So it's never about taking advantage. It's always about paying someone really fairly and well for where they live and the skills they're bringing to the table.
Okay. I'm so glad that, because I have to say, again, being in the podcasting world, you hear about virtual assistants from the Philippines in particular and other countries all the time. And when you hear those numbers thrown around, $5, $6, $8 an hour, it does cross your mind like that's icky. That's like icky, but it's not icky. So it is. I love the way you describe it. They are actually being paid multiples of the minimum wage. Just like when you're here in the US, if you're getting multiples of the minimum wage, it's because your skill set demands it. But it's just that the base level is different. So love it. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay. So with that icky thing off the table, let's talk about this now. So the thing is, I guess when you said many of us resist the idea of hiring a VA, and maybe it is because that you have this fear of you get what you pay for and you figure it's a low rate, so you're not going to get quality. So if we take that off the table, I think the other thing that I think that we struggle with is really understanding how are we going to adequately convey what we need done. How are we going to know it gets done? I guess really the bottom line is the accountability. How do we know that we're going to have accountability for a quality work product?
So it's a challenging question because it takes a lot of different areas into account. At a high level, right, we're going to start with knowing that we're getting the right person for the right job, right? And that they have the right skill sets coming in. And I will add to that point that a virtual assistant overseas may not be right for every type of task. We can get more into that later. Okay. But a lot of tasks they can do that, and they can do them exceptionally well. But those tend to be more the repeatable processes in your business, the things that are getting done over and over and over again. Next, it's about being clear in your communication. So we have to take responsibility for the responses that we get. And we have to remember that when we're communicating online, it is so much different than sitting face to face with someone. Most of our communication is nonverbal. And what that means is that our words alone only account for 10% of our communication. So it's about developing the skill set of learning how to communicate clearly and do that in a way where you actually are at a hindrance because you're in a virtual environment. And that's a skill set as well. And then the final thing is making sure that you have the right hiring process and the right accountability systems so that you can keep in touch with your workers on a regular basis. So making sure that you're using tools like Time Doctor so that you can actually see screenshots of someone's work as they're working. Making sure that you are continually systematizing things in your business so there's not so much guesswork. Those are the types of things that can really help us in a virtual environment.
Okay. Now, I would say to you that probably even when we're going to hire a real life breathing human being in our studio space, I know from my own experience of running a business all these years and from helping other entrepreneurs do the same thing, what I know the most difficult thing to do is to first create the system yourself and have it documented so that it can be duplicated by the employee that you're onboarding. And this is the number one struggle. I'm so grateful in WindowWorks that we have our systems and they're well set and well established, but I have been going through this same pain struggle with the podcast, okay? So I remember it from 30 plus years ago and I'm in it again. I know the importance of it. I know the value of it. I know why I have to do it, but I do empathize with the process of it. Do you have tips? Because I do agree with you that the first thing after you find the right person, so the first thing is the interview process and find the right person. But once you've found the right person, the only way you can set them up for success is if you can clearly enunciate what their tasks are in a systemized way. Don't you agree?
I do agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
And
the
so
hard part. I'm going to tell you, that's the hard
that is
part.
Yeah, that is the hard part. And it's especially hard for those of us who are extremely creative, right? Because
Yes.
when we're in a state where we're just naturally flowy with the universe and ideas just kind of come to us non-linearly, when we're asked to be put into a linear step-by-step fashion, we're like, I'm not like that. This is really painful. Please don't make me do
It's the
that.
truth. It's the
So,
truth.
so one thing that might help your audience is just understanding that you can actually have the virtual assistant document the process for and with you. So you do not need to have all your systems documented before you hire someone. In fact, setting that expectation for yourself might mean that you never hire somebody, because it's
Right.
sort of like saying to somebody, well, you've got to be in really good shape to go to the gym. And you're like,
That's
I'm coming to the gym to get in good shape. I cannot be smaller. That is the point of going. So, in order
That's
to
an
get
excellent example, Bonnie. That is an excellent example. It's like, and it's like the other one is like, you have to clean the house for the housekeeper to come. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, so, but that's the, so now I never heard of that before, that you believe and you know and you've experienced that you can actually hire the right VA to sit down with you and extract your systems out of you and then document them to you and present them back to you as a written or I guess probably a video system, because I've heard of that part.
Yeah, 100%. So let's pretend we're doing that right now. So what we would do is I'd take notes on your process, right? I would, if I was the virtual assistant, write it all down in step-by-step directions. And I'd probably include screenshots. And if I could, if it's online, I'd include videos, because that'll enhance the learning comprehension. When we can see and hear things, we tend to be a lot more successful. And I could include a written guide with you. Then I could present that back to you. And then you could go through it and see if you missed in any steps in communicating that with me. And then if you really wanted to make sure that system was solid, go have someone else in your team do the system just using the instructions and make sure that they can do it as well as the first person did. And if they can do that, then you've got a foolproof system. Should that person ever not be available, you're not going to have a huge problem in your business.
I'm madly in love with you right now. I'm just going to tell you that right now.
LuAnn, I'm available, but I heard you're married and I'm not into women. So like, I mean, I feel like we have some problems, but I like you too.
No, this is a game changer, Bonnie. This is a game changer, because you're exactly on the money in the sense that I know that in order to hire, that we have to understand so clearly what that person's job is going to be. Otherwise, we all hire without it, right? We all have been in the situation where we've hired without the job completely enunciated and systemized. And then together with the hire, we go through the muddle of, trying to figure out that job and trying to systemize it and everything. But the thing is, it's first of all, it's not efficient. Second of all, the person is frustrated because you say to them one day, oh, do these 3 things. And the next day you're like, oh, wait, I forgot to tell you to do that other thing before you do the 5th thing. It's brutal. It's an absolutely brutal nightmare. And especially if you're a solo, when you are responsible for, rainmaking, for seeing clients and making presentations and putting together all the design stuff, that to think about getting in shape before getting to the gym, you just don't go. It's exactly the analogy. I love it. I love it. Yeah. So are there different, for instance, this is a question that crosses my mind. So if I were sitting here listening and I was thinking, my goodness, I'm in love with Bonnie too. I want to have this in my life. Is it just like we have employees that have different skill sets? Would you start with one certain sort of VA that would be the one that goes through this process of systemizing and documenting your systems for you, but then you might ultimately hire a different VA who's now going to execute those systems, because that's such a different skill set as a person who's going to do and a person who's going to analyze and repeat it back to you? You see what I'm asking you?
Totally. Yeah. And that's where hybrid sourcing can come in really really well. So I have students at all levels. So I have a student, her name is Melissa, and with her chosen budget, she just hires overseas. She's got a gal, as she says. I've got a gal for $5 or $6 an hour, she says, right? She's an amazing life coach, and she, charges premium rates for her services, but she doesn't want to do anything with her WordPress, her Pinterest, her Instagram. That person creates systems for her and documents it for her. That works for her. For me, though, I would say the easiest way to do a lot of systems work is to go have an American VA go figure things out on your behalf and then document the system and then have someone at the $5 an hour level duplicate it. That's a little bit different for me because I have a little bit more of a budget. If I didn't have as much of a budget, I would go straight to the person in the Philippines. I'd talk to them. I'd have them take detailed notes step by step, and then I'd see if someone else could execute the system. Okay. And they're really good at that. That's like something that's actually really awesome about the Philippines is they love systems there, and they're quite used to making these types of things over and over again.
Okay. And so then that leads us to what are the best types of tasks within our business to consider outsourcing. And I'm hearing it. It's the things that are duplicatable, things that happen every day or every week or every month in your job, right? In your company.
Yeah. I was recently on another podcast, and the host said that one of his friends says that there's a great rule of two. So if you're finding yourself doing a task more than 2 times and it's repeatable, right, and it doesn't require you to do it, then that's a great task to systematize. So it's really about looking at what are the tasks that you're doing on an ongoing basis, which means your daily, your weekly, and your monthly tasks that are low dollar per hour tasks, meaning they're not the thing that you're best at in the world, in this case, likely design, right? It's your Instagram, it's your Pinterest, it's the answering of emails, it's all the other things that get in the way of you being the rainmaker.
Right. Right. It's funny because Madeline McRae is a business coach that specializes in the window treatment industry, and she's been on the show, and she has a exercise that she walks you through that says, what are the $10 an hour jobs in your company? What are the $100 an hour jobs in your company? What are the $1,000 and what are the $10,000 an hour jobs in your company? And it makes you focus on, do I really need to be doing this? Like, can I teach someone to do this in place of me doing it? And clearly all the $10 and $100 an hour jobs have to go to somebody else. That's just the way it is in order to grow, right? In order to grow.
Yeah. And I think the thing that's really unclear for a lot of people, particularly when they're starting out in business, is people are unclear about what tasks to delegate. What are the low dollar per hour tasks? So that's where someone like me comes in, and just following our work will really get you clear, because we can share with you how do you get, what types of tasks should you be letting go of? And those are just available for free on our website and things like that,
Oh, okay. So on your website, is there a download or something that somebody can go through?
Yeah, we've got downloads and we have a lot of content that's coming out in the coming weeks about, what types of tasks your virtual assistant can handle, how your VA can make you a better human, all sorts of really fun and like goofy things. But like we have a download that's like 99 tasks a VA can handle for you.
Oh.
So get clear, what are the $10 an hour tasks? Because I think that's where people get really caught up. They think, I don't even know what I get this person to do. So we try to fill in that gap for you.
Can you share a few of those with us? Obviously not 99 of them, but throw a couple at us so we can get our brain thinking on this.
Yeah, for sure. So just in terms of business stuff, your email is a great place to start. So creating systems around your email, your administrative work, your travel, creating PowerPoint presentations, online research. I love the idea of getting a virtual assistant in the Philippines to do a lot of your online shopping as an interior designer. And you and I had talked about in the break, you're like, oh, well, like that would be part of your core tasks. I somewhat disagree that it could almost be like if you had a huge house and that you need 50 modern lamps, or you need, 5 white modern lamps that are this specific size. I mean, personally, I would never want to do the level of research that was required to do that online shopping. If it completely lights you up and it's not something where you're scaling at a level where you've got, 10 houses to do in the next month and it feels really refreshing to do it, then totally do that yourself. But at a certain point, all of your interior designers are going to scale. And at that point, having someone to give you, like, let's say they're not doing the shopping for you, but they're presenting 10 options of the one lamp that you're going to choose, it saves you so much time. And it's just a huge ROI replacer, because guess what? Now you've got 10 hours back in your week, and what can you be doing? You can be going and being in front of customers, making more business. And that's how a lot of the people who we teach, double and triple their businesses, because they start to replace themselves in their businesses. And that's where the exciting parts of growing your business can really start to happen.
Yeah, I know. And I'm on the fence there with that, because I know that to one hand, we're going to have a designer that's going to say to us, I could never have somebody else pick all that. That's ridiculous. That's what I'm getting paid to do, right? But on the other hand, I can see that you're not asking them to make the final selection. You're saying, here is an example of the style that I am seeing. Like, even if you showed them a mood board or whatever, and then go source me 5 things. So that's often what a designer will have their junior designer do for them, right? Okay. But I guess that where the rub is, and you'll tell me what I guess safety nets are in place, because most interior designers are going to source from trade sources. So in order for somebody to go and do that research on a trade site, they may need our login information to do that. So what are safety? Do wait? Yeah.
Now, when we're talking about matters of security, one thing that's really important to keep in mind is that trust is built with time and experience. So just like you wouldn't in the dating world give a guy you just met or a girl you just met your credit card and be like, hey, can you just go purchase that thing that cost $1,000 for me? Right? Similarly, we're not going to give the keys to the castle to our new virtual assistant in another country or even in the same country overnight. So just making sure that you create systems and you're cautious about giving trust too quickly is something to keep in mind. And that might mean that you don't outsource certain things. But also, the other thing to keep in mind is that a lot of people don't necessarily have the motivation to harm you unless you've done something really bad to them. And often that becomes an issue of being clear on what kind of communicator you are through conflict and learning how to deal with conflict in a better way. Because what I've found, and this is after hiring over 300 freelancers online, is that people rarely act maliciously without given a reason to do so. And I've had almost no nightmare experiences in that regard. And I think it's because I teach people how to master the art of communication through conflict, which is really important because, LuAnn, I don't know about you, but I'm friends with a lot of entrepreneurs. We're not always nice through conflict. We're nice people, but some of us are aggressive. And when the other person thinks that they're wrong, they'll be like, yo, you are wrong. And they're just like, they're really intense about it. And they blame and they raise their voice. And they're actually great people. They just have a little bit of a problem when it comes to conflict. Or others of us are more like me or former me. And we get passive or passive aggressive. And we just stop communicating with the person. This is old Bonnie. And we're just like, yeah, they'll figure it out. Those are the types of things that really hurt trust and are more likely to cause a security incident because you have, in one way or another, hurt somebody. So
well, it sounds like that really the bottom line of what you're describing there is that just because it's a VA, it's a virtual assistant, just because the person is not working for you in your physical studio space, that all of the same rules apply. Is that you, as you said, you let the relationship build, and if the person is earned and is worthy of more and more access, that's when you give it. You said, like you said, you would never give access to a brand new employee. So it's no different there. And secondly is that in order to run an effective team in person, you have to be willing to have the hard conversation. If things aren't going well, you need to be able to describe that, express that, have a conversation about it that doesn't unempower them, that doesn't devalue them as a person, but just gets to the root of where the conflict is, and then hopefully resolve it or look to end the relationship. And it's no different than a VA. So what you're saying is you just don't let it go off into the sunset, off the rails, and you don't address it. It's the same thing. It's the same thing.
And there's certain tools that you can use as well. So there's tools like LastPass, which is a password management tool where you can actually share the password with someone without them actually being exposed to what the password is. So that's an opportunity. And then if they, leave your team, you can just unshare it and they'll never see the password. Another tool that you might use is some of the team viewing software out there. So LogMeIn, or even Zoom actually has an option where someone can take control of your screen. So there's a lot of different things where you could actually put someone onto a computer and have access to an account without actually giving them the keys to the castle. That would be a little bit more complex, or you might have to time the limit that they're on your account, or have someone watch over them if it was something super sensitive, or just even set up a dummy computer that has almost nothing on it except for the login. This is more complicated,
right?
But you get the idea.
Right. But then, okay, so I needed to bring it up, but you're right. You just have to be smart about it. And if you get to the point that the trust is there, it doesn't even hurt at that point to have some of these other LastPass and things in place in order to be extra careful. And I'll just say out loud too, all the designers are thinking, well, LuAnn, a lot of the trade sites have like I know Kravet has, you can go to Kravet.com and you can see the fabrics and the furniture and everything, but you can't purchase. You have to have a trade login to purchase. So you could even have somebody source from the consumer facing side of a site possibly and present you selections. And then if you decide you wanted to, take it the step further, you could do it on your own. But the thing is, there's a lot of other tasks in our business that we could outsource before we even cross that bridge. So we could talk about newsletter development and execution of the newsletter and getting it out. We could talk about, like you said, preparing travel arrangements, YouTube, managing a YouTube account, managing your Instagram account. Those are a little tricky. We're very, 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 very over here in designer land, very proprietary about our social media things. And I guess a lot of industries are, I don't know, but I know we are. And we're very much like it has to be our voice, and it has to be, it has to sound like us, it has to look like us. But there are, a highly intuitive, motivated person probably could be taught to do a lot of the things related to social media. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I understand, obviously, designers outsourcing any kind of design work, it feels weird, right?
Yeah.
But yeah,
we're not accountants, you know what I mean? It's different.
And I could understand why someone would be more reluctant to let some of that go. I think that there is a sourcing process that if you get it right, you can find people who are just as talented as you are. And you can also systematize things and create like highly developed processes around them so that people are pulling from things you would have picked anyway. For content, you can make sure that you develop something like a style guide. And even if you want to be a part of the process, you can create pieces for them. So for people who are really struggling to let go of control in the beginning of the process, you can do things like having someone do 80% of the work and then you just do the final 20% or the beginning 20%. So for instance, for social media, right? Let's say that you are picky about your Instagram account. So you want to choose the photos. Like you want to be the person who's like looking through the photos of what kinds of things you share. Okay, so you do that initial 20%. But perhaps you don't want to be the person who's looking at all of your newsletters and all the content you've ever made in your life and choosing what caption goes with what photo. You could have someone do that piece of it for you. Likely someone in the United States would be better for that because the English would be better. And then you could review that and say, okay, well, now I'm just reviewing the work as opposed to doing it myself. And if you create style guides and things like that, it can really help the process. I don't want to name names here because it's not my privilege to say, but there's some really famous bloggers out there who do not actually write their own content. And they have incredibly in-depth style guides that go through 30 pages of how they write and why they write that way. And that's one way they replace themselves in those aspects.
Wow.
But like you're saying, like you always begin your hiring process with hiring things out that support you doing your core tasks. So you can hire out your Instagram, you can hire out your Pinterest, you can hire out your YouTube channel development, you can hire out your lead generation. You could even have a research assistant go through and find all the networking events that you have to be at so that you can be in person with people to have those conversations that are going to get you more sales opportunities. Those are all things that you can help hire out to support you in making money and doing the thing you love most in the world, which is design.
So you're making me think about this level of a question now. So for instance, the person that is able to follow my direction and combination of direction and style guide that can create possibly an Instagram feed for me. And here's what I know is, I mean, my assistant is doing all of the Instagram except the conversation. Okay. And it's hours that she puts in creating the stories and putting all the captions on the stories and blah, blah, blah. Was doing all of it myself, and everybody completely noticed my Instagram game changed when you can tell exactly when I stopped doing it. But I now am the one who just spends the time each day communicating, talking, because I know these people, I know these designers that are talking to me, right? But the thing is, there is a whole lot of work that's happening there that she is scheduling and that she's putting together and yada, yada. So I can believe in that and grab onto that. My question is, when you start to think about the skill set for somebody that does that, maybe if I were to isolate my Instagram account, if I'm a designer and I'm going to isolate the 80% that I'm going to farm out on my Instagram account, that might be 6 hours a week. I don't know. I'm just taking a guess that it's 6 hours. But then I also want somebody that is going to do a more administrative sort of task. Maybe it is researching, whatever it is. I don't know. Actually, just more administrative office task. Am I going to have a combination of multiple VAs, one who has an aesthetic and an eye for design and curation, and for that, because that's a different skill than the person, just like in my real office, I would not have my admin do my Instagram because they're different superpowers. So do we have is it logical that we would have 4 or 5 VAs each only doing 6 or 8 hours a week for us?
Well, I love this question because it's so intuitive and so smart of you, LuAnn. And the answer is yes and no. So it just depends. It depends on each individual person. But what you're kind of getting at is that there's no unicorns in life, right? There's no unicorn who is the perfect video editor, who's the perfect with Instagram, who's perfect with social media, the perfect admin, and can also do your accounting.
Right. And it doesn't exist. None of us are good at, even us as the principal, we're not the best one for all of these tasks.
Exactly. So what I like to do to try to keep things practical for people is I try to keep them focused on a few core skill sets for the virtual assistant. And then I say, just like an ice cream sundae, you can have a couple toppings, but if you go over the top with it, it's not going to be tasty anymore. So it's not going to work. So in the same way, we're going to say that your core base here is you're going to want to find a virtual assistant who is an excellent communicator, because they're going to be communicating on your behalf to a lot of clients. So they need to be exceptionally clear. They should be good at basic conflict management, and assertive and kind and warm. You also want to find someone who's an excellent problem solver. So they're not the person who's coming back to you and being like, LuAnn, I don't know how to use WordPress.
Oh, yeah,
I need your help. LuAnn, ClickFunnels, I can't. The help is not working. And you're like, honey, I hired you so that you could take the steps to not re-involve me in the project and take me away from my core tasks. Exactly. So definitely finding people who are problem solvers, who will take those additional steps, who will come back to you and say, LuAnn, it appears it's not working. Here's what I did. Here's another solution. Which one do you want to do?
That's my kind of girl. Love
Right?
that.
Like, here's what I did, and that's the kind of person you want to find as a virtual assistant, because they're going to be spending so much time alone and there's so little hand holding for so much of the work that they're going to be doing. So you need to find someone like that. The next thing is just making sure that they are very agreeable. So not someone who has a high dominant personality in that they are constantly reverse delegating to you. So one of the problems with finding people who might be successful in life but not successful as in the assistant role is if you find someone who are too high in the driver sense, meaning they're too high in the dominant, like this is what we need to do, they may start reverse delegating to you and say things like, all right, LuAnn, totally happy to make your travel arrangements for you, but just make a small list of everything you just said and send it to me. And you're like,
that's
no,
gonna work.
No, that's called reverse delegating. And that means that you're taking time away from me in order to do the job. And people who are dominant, we love you. First of all, you're awesome. But you wouldn't make a fantastic assistant unless your boss specifically wants someone to tell them what to do.
Right. That's so funny. No, that's true. Okay. So the thing is, though, that you want to find these qualities, and maybe this is your primary VA, but you might necessarily require secondary VAs for some more specific skill sets that might be more artistic or intrinsic to other parts of your business.
Yeah, so start with those three core things, and then I'd say you can get one topping, so to speak, but and like really focus in on that. Maybe two if you're lucky. So you can go with those three core characteristics, and then you might find someone who has a really strong aesthetic eye, right? That could be enough. Or you start with those three strong characteristics, and then you find someone who has a really strong technical sense, or all of those characteristics, and they're really strong writers. Sometimes people who are creative tend to be good writers, and they tend to be good with aesthetics. So sometimes you get lucky and you get 2 for 1. Same thing with technology, actually. A lot of people who are great with tech also happen to be great writers. So sometimes you get more than one thing, but you have to be realistic in knowing that someone isn't going to be the video editor, the Pinterest person, the accountant, and so forth.
Right. So before I let you go, tell me just a couple of tips on two aspects of it. A is, where do we look for a VA, and both in the U.S. and out of the U.S., and how do we attract and write a job description that attracts a quality VA?
For sure. Okay, so let's start with hiring a virtual assistant in the US, and then we'll work backwards and just go with different websites for outside of the US. So my favorite website to go to is Craigslist, which I know is surprising because people don't associate that with the highest caliber experience. But that's where I found most of my A players. People who've gone to Harvard, people who have worked for E-News and have come on to work for me. And what I'll tell you is that it's not about where you go, it's how you attract them. So we've been doing a lot of metaphors here. So just in the same way that you could meet the love of your life pretty much anywhere, including a bar, right? It's about who you're showing up as and how you attract that person and your filtering mechanism for finding the good ones. Obviously, there's certain places where all the hotties hang out, so to speak, and you need to be aware of them. And there's also places where you're less likely to find people. But the process that you show up with and how you are attracting the people is everything. So I would start with a really compelling job ad, no matter where I was hiring. And I would make sure that I really express the emotional benefits of working for you. One thing to really keep in mind here is that people's motivation tends to be the strongest when it's intrinsic motivation, meaning the best people are working for more than just the money. And when you keep that in mind, it's easier to create a really compelling job ad. So think about, what are the awesome ways in which someone would want to work for you? Are you a really amazing boss? Do they have flexible work hours? Is this position virtual? Are there aspects of giving back to what you do that they might be really intrigued by? Are they going to get paid to do something they love? Those are all good things to sprinkle throughout the job ad. And you can even model other people's job ads to get a sense of what actually sounds good. And be human. People hate looking at job advertisements that look like they were written by robots. So make sure you write things that are compelling and emotionally interesting. That's step number one.
Okay.
And then step number two is you want to make sure you have a good filtering mechanism. So what I'd recommend for your people is that they create a Google form at the end of the job ad. And this is going to go to a place where they're going to collect a little bit of information about someone. So it's going to start with their name, their contact information, the rate that they want to be paid per hour, and say this is just something that you're collecting up front to get an idea of the range. And you're also going to want to ask for some samples of their work if you're looking for anything creative, right? So you can browse those portfolios and really quickly sort out the duds. And if you're looking for anything that's like virtual assistant oriented, then you're going to look for hypothetical questions. So think about some stressful situations you've been in over the past few months and get as specific as possible and ask them what they would do in those situations. So for instance, you might say, LuAnn is trapped on an island having a fantastic mastermind with Richard Branson and cannot be reached at all. The other piece of our business starts blowing up in flames. You can't reach LuAnn. What are 5 things that you would do right now to make sure that LuAnn's husband is fine? The conference goes on without a hitch and da-da-da. I mean, that's a huge circumstance, but you get the idea.
Right.
Put them in a situation of stress that they might actually be in. Create a very vivid hypothetical. Ask them what they would do. What this does is it tests their ability to think on their feet, which is what you want. That's the problem solver. If they give vague answers here, that's not who you want. You want someone who gives specific answers. And this really helps you find someone who is not going to come to you and be like, LuAnn, I don't know how to use WordPress. Help me. So that's really important. The other thing that's really important is not to put too many questions like that on the job form. So use 1 or 2 and always ask for what they want to be paid up front. And this really prevents you from getting to the end of the hiring process and effectively wasting their time knowing that they're out of budget for you. And it also helps you do something really beautiful and magical, which is finding the perfect person for the perfect price, meaning there are people, LuAnn, who are going to blow your audience away, who are going to answer those stressful situations so well and so beautifully, and they're going to charge $10 to $20 an hour less than other people who want to charge maybe 3 times as much and give really crappy answers.
Wow. So the thing is, what I'm hearing, you tell me if I'm correct, what I'm hearing is that somebody who their job is as a professional VA, they're going to look at a series of an inquiry like this and understand very clearly, yes, I'm going to put my rate up there that I want to be paid. Yes, I'm going to answer these questions, as opposed to somebody that randomly comes across this and thinks, well, I'm not going to answer how much I get paid. I want you to tell me, or why would I answer this question? So in other words, it's expected in this realm that this is somewhat the process. So somebody that responds to this and goes down this road with you is already an indicator that they are more suited to this work than somebody else that just randomly says, well, I'm sick to going to work every day. Maybe I'll try being a BA.
Yeah, this is why I love you, LuAnn. You're just the smartest person ever. Exactly. So that's what it is. It's like you're testing for the agreeableness even in that question. Because I've gone through thousands of these at this point. I've read thousands of responses, and you do occasionally get a couple jerks who give passive aggressive responses to that question. And you're like, well, 300 people just answered their rate, so I'm not choosing you. Sorry. You're not agreeable. And that's quality number 2 that Bonnie just taught me that I need in a virtual assistant.
Right. I think it's great. It's funny because it reminds me, the reason I thought of it in that terms is, this is many years ago. I remember when we do Christmas Eve dinner at my house, it is 20 people and it's 6 courses of the 7 courses of the fish dinners, and it's all on real dinnerware, and it's insanity. It is the most exciting, fun night of our year in our family, but the kitchen is brutal, right? And of course, fish all has to be cooked on the spot. And so I very often will hire a server or two for the night, because you just have to have somebody keeping the dishes going in the kitchen in between all these courses. Otherwise, I'm not at my own dinner. I'm hardly at it to begin with, but even with the help, right? And I remember putting an ad in Craigslist one time saying, this is 4 hours worth of work. It is no serving required. Be in comfortable clothing, but we will move the dishes back and forth from the dining room, me and my daughters, but you'll be just cleaning and keeping the kitchen rolling in and out of dishes. And I said, I'm willing to spend, this is like 15 years ago, $150 for the 4 hours, right? And I got so many people that were interested in it, and I got like half a dozen people that are like, that's ridiculous. We're a professional wait staff. That should be at $50 an hour. And I'm just thinking to myself, you don't have to do it. You don't have to do it.
Thanks for conscientiously objecting to the job, and this is why you don't have one.
Right. It's like it's 4 hours. It's a lot of money for 4 hours in, 2000. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Also, if you put a range at which you're willing to pay and they're applying for a job, really just they're effectively wasting their own time. And there's people who are really excited to do a simple task and get paid for it. There's people who need that money who would come and be just so happy to do it. Mm-hmm. So it's just, in any hiring process, like anything in life, there's always people who are not going to be happy with it. But honestly, what you're really doing with this process is you're saving them time. Mm-hmm. Because if you're putting a range at which you're willing to pay, right, then that's just what you're able to pay. And if they're not able to meet that range, that's okay. You always want to pay people fairly for their skill set. You never want to underpay people. But like you're saying, in the instance of what you were doing, it's not like you were asking for professional wait staff. You were asking for a very small part of that. And it, obviously you always get some flack here and there. It's just part of humans, right? But it's not been my experience with the thousands of people I've hired. A lot of them have gone through this process. You find the best of the best people. It's a gift, and it makes the hiring process a whole lot simpler. And then one thing you can do to take it a step further, once you've kind of gone through your responses, is you can grade them. So you can say, Susie Q had attitude problems. She's an F. She's out. But Jen over here is awesome. She gave an A+ answer. Right. And then reach out to your top 5 to 10 people and take it a step further. Get them on the phone. Ask them a couple questions about, what they're looking for. See if that matches up. Do a quick 10-minute just get to know you call to weed out the people who you very obviously don't want, the people who show up late or look really scattered or, just aren't a weirdo, so to speak. And then from there, don't spend too much time in that conversation because interviews can give a lot of false positives. Then say to them, listen, Jen, I love your work. And what I'd love to do is really take this relationship to the next level and do what we'd like to do as an interview project. What this is really going to do, Jen, is it's going to allow us to see how we work together. And it's got to be a match on both sides. If it's a fit for you, but not for us, that's ultimately not a fit, right? And same thing, if it's a fit for us, but not for you, there's no way of knowing that before we actually work together. So what we'd like to do is do a small interview project or a series of them. And that'll allow us to really understand the intangibles of the relationships, which we'll never know without actually working together. How does that sound to you, Jen? And I've done this a million times. People always say that sounds amazing. I wish everyone did that. Thank you.
Right. Because it gives you both the chance to see if you are compatible. And it has, I do that when I hire. I say to everybody that I hire, this is a 3-month period for you to see if you like us and for us to see if we like you. At the end of 3 months, we're going to have a meeting and I'm going to ask you, do you like it here? And I'm going to let you know if I like having you here. I mean, it's just, you know what I mean?
Bold or blunt about it. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, because you know what? You need an exit plan. Otherwise, it's icky. You know what I'm saying? You have to have an exit plan. So this is in place of that because you're not in person. So what you're saying is you're going to pay them the hourly. I'm assuming you're going to pay them to do these projects, but it's a built-in safety net of, you're really awesome, Jen, but we're not working together so hot. Thanks so much. You've been paid for these projects. You didn't lose any time or money, but I'm going to move on and find somebody else.
Yeah, and you can do that with, what I recommend is that you do that with more than one person. And so start with just one small interview project. Maybe it's just taking notes on a call and making one process or system and checking in to see how they did with that and doing that with 3 people. If you call it an interview project, you can get more responses. And one thing you can do with this to kind of keep it fair is just look at what your applicant pool looks like. So if you've got 20 amazing people here, right? Then you can say to Jen, in all honesty, Jen, I really like you. And I've got 5 other people who are really interested in this role. What I'd like to do is use this as an interview project. You won't be paid for it, but it is an opportunity to see if you want to work with us. If you've got a lot of applicants, you can do that. If you don't have many really strong applicants, then I would do that with 2 people who are your top 2 applicants and just see what comes back.
Okay, good. Great tips. One last thing before you go. So your number one resource for U.S. is Craigslist, and I'm sure the process is very similar, whether it's in the U.S. or out, but what's a resource for outside the U.S.?
Yeah, so I love Craigslist. In the U.S., I love Craigslist. I like Indeed.com. I like Facebook groups. I like posting on a multitude of sites. So you really get a lot of opportunity for your ads to be seen. In terms of foreign resources, I like the international Facebook groups for virtual assistants. I like onlinejobs.ph. I like virtualstaff.ph. I like using all of those areas together. And then I think just the important thing to remember here is that it's always about the process. So we have a webinar that goes through the step-by-step where they can go through the overview of the hiring process, and really getting good at that process before you go to those sites is really important, because I don't want your listeners to go to these sites and be like, well, I went to onlinejobs.ph and I got a bad person. Right. Well, it's always about the process. Remember, it's like you can meet the love of your life in a bar, but it's how you're showing up, right? And what's your filtering process? Are you going out with the person who's very obviously not a fit?
Right.
Are you?
Exactly. No, it's
true.
Or
are you saying, oh, I happen to meet somebody who is everything on my checklist, and we happen to meet at a bar, but he's awesome, so I'm not going to not meet him, And then it's about, using the right pools and casting a wide net, of course. Like, you have to make sure that you're not just going to the bar, but you're going to the places where you're likely to meet people, which might be your common interest groups and, things like that. So translating it back to making sure, again, you're posting on a number of job websites so that you can really find the best of the best person, which is defined as the top 10% of the workforce. So if you only post on a few sites, you're not going to get that person.
Right. I love it. It's great information. We started by saying it's scary. There's no question it's scary, because it's something that's new for most of us, to have somebody work off-site and not even in, that you can pull them in once a month for a meeting or something like that, right? But you have Skype now, you have Zoom now, you have different ways that you can meet with people. I think the biggest thing is that the 2 takeaways that I'm thinking about this are, you really have to get very clear on the skill set that you need and that you want to hire for, and create that job description that is an awesome attractor of the right person. And then you actually want to have your system set up, or be prepared to, I love the other idea, honestly, of being prepared to have that part of their job description to set up, to work with you to create the system that can be duplicated. So big stuff. Thank you so much, Bonnie. I really appreciate it. Just tell everybody how they access this webinar that you talked about, how they access the 99 tasks document that you talked about.
Yeah, totally. Okay. So the best place for them to go for free resources of information about me and just further deepening of their knowledge is going to bonniefahy.com, and they'll see a variety of videos there, and even our upcoming podcast will be hosted there, and they'll have a lot of free information there. We do have an automated webinar, which is pre-recorded, which they can go to at thelivemoreformula.com, and we actually have an upcoming series of live webinars as well, so they can go there and interact with me personally. So those are the best places. bonniefahy.com. Go to the show notes for the spelling of my name. It's a little tricky. It's Fahy. And then making sure that they go to livemoreformula.com for the automated webinar.
Nice. Very nice. Bonnie, thank you so much. I really appreciate your sharing all your information with us today.
Yeah, thank you. This has been such a pleasure. I've really enjoyed myself.
Thank you so much for joining me again today. This podcast is a production of WindowWorks, your resource for custom window treatments and awnings. To learn how we can help you on your next interior design project, go to www.windowworks-nj.com. And if you're interested in working with me on your business, either through masterminds or one-on-one coaching, or you want to know how to get my book, The Making of a Well-Designed Business, or you just want to know what's going on in the podcast land and where I'm going to be, all of that is found at LuAnnNigara.com. Thank you so much. Have an excellent day.